All right. Good afternoon. Here today with Dawn Greenfield, Ireland. As I was researching your professional accomplishments, I could see that you've written books, screenplay, novels, and nonfiction, a little bit of mystery, some sci-fi fantasy, dystopian, even a little, I think it's a sci-fi romance.
Yes, that's correct.
As well as themed notebooks, and then you coach writers, do editing, formatting, and publishing.
Yes.
And you have a website that is well appointed. I like your website. Easy to follow, looks good.
Oh, thank you.
And that's at www.degreenfield.com. And that'll be in the show notes too for anybody that wants to check it out. So, writing, script writing, all that. How'd you get started?
You know, it's a very funny little journey. So back in 1979, I had a very long commute to work, and went through. Come on, move. Sorry,
She's
one
okay.
cat. The other one might be up here. But anyways, so I had this really long commute in Houston, down Highway 6 over Addicks Dam, which was very forested back in the 1979 era. And I started daydreaming about this crazy story, and it just grew and grew. So, I mean, by the end of the week, I had a yellow tablet and a pen on the passenger seat. So anytime I stopped, I would, just furiously write down notes, and I'm guilty to say that, yes, when I got to work, I typed things out. So that's how I started writing. I didn't know what I was doing. I had absolutely no background in writing. No, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Cats do what cats do.
She has a very closed mind, So that was the very beginning of my first science fiction book called, back then it was Second Chance. And that transformed into Prophecy of Thal over the years through many, many, many rewrites and, whacking myself. I mean, back then, like I said, I had no experience with writing. I didn't know what I was doing. And I finished the first draft somewhere around 1984, which I have in a box. And I will tell everybody right now that for 85% of that story, my lead character cried. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to write. You don't know how to, put a story together. And you write by the seat of your pants with no training, and you end up with what you end up with. It was garbage. It was just really garbage. And every once in a while, I will take the box out and open it up and look at a few pages and think, oh my God, thank God no one saw those pages.
It's interesting when you look back at things to see how they stand up to time. More so, you see it with movies than, I guess you could go back and read a story. Although usually with published books that are lasting and around for a while, you end up with something like Melville or, a classic, and you're like, okay, this is pretty good. And you can look at a movie from your early memories. Like for me, it's Flash Gordon. And then you look at that when you're a kid and you're like, man, that's great. And when you then become in your 20s or 30s, you may see it again and you go, that did not age well. But then as you get older after that, you look at it and the nostalgia kicks in and you're like, yeah, it's bad. It's mystery science fiction theater type stuff, but I liked it a lot better in my 40s than I did when I saw it again in my 20s or 30s. And I loved it when I was a kid, but that's something how things can hold up to time and how they change in your mind about it. So maybe it's something worth revisiting.
Hmm.
And have another look at it.
Oh, I don't want to have another look at it. It was frighteningly awful, just awful. At that point in my life, back in the 70s, I was uneducated. I did not have any sense of grammar or punctuation or anything like that. Evidently, I missed that in school or something. I have no clue. But over the years, through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, or the early 2000s, I really learned my craft. And, I've won an incredible amount of awards through, let's see, novels, nonfiction, and screenplays.
So how did you cross over from writing novels to screenplays, or did it happen at the same time?
Actually, back in the early 80s, well, no, it was actually the mid to late 80s, the literary agent that I had at that time asked me to adapt Second Chance, which is now Prophecy of Thal, into a screenplay. Well, there goes another adventure, because I had no clue what a screenplay was. I didn't know anything about them. And so I took off and, found books that could, teach me things, and had to learn the formatting, because the formatting is very specific. And a screenplay is very streamlined. You do not have the, you just don't have novelish type expressions or anything in there, so you really have to whittle it down. And that's really kind of hard to do when you've got like a 400 some odd page book, and you can only go, well, back then it was like 120 pages. That's it. And now really nowadays they really would prefer, between 90 and 105, 110 at the very most, because one page equals 1 minute of screen time. So it's an expensive proposition to make a movie. Excuse me.
I recently thought I should write a screenplay for what would be like a 40-minute TV show. Me and another guy are working on it. And I've written a few books, learned a lot writing that, and poetry lately. Well, usually I wrote a lot of poetry growing up, and then I got back into it lately. But with the screenwriting, the format is something to learn. And I was, even in writing novels, thinking about how to do assignments of people saying things. Like, would you write it like a play in a textbook from high school, where you have the person's name, a semicolon, and then what they say? And then looking at screenplays, especially I found it useful looking at screenplays of TV shows or movies or movie scenes that I've seen. And you see the setup of it, where it's just the person's name in the middle, and then what they say, the other person's name and what they say. And you open those scenes with just exterior, parking lot, daytime, and then it goes from there. And I never understood what people were talking about when they're like, well, you need to get somebody to change your book to a screenplay because it's different. And I was like, if you can write a book, you can write screenplay. And while I think that's true, it's much different. And it has taught me to think about setting differently and to write more simply, even though my writing is pretty sparse as it is. But the idea that a screenplay is just instructions to a director, and instructions to the point of their ideas or suggestions, because then the director can do whatever they want, really. And then you have space for the actor to act. So you don't have to put all the words that end with ly in there. The actor is the person that figures that out. And then the director is the person that helps them. And really the writer of it, it seems like you get a chance at setting the stage, but it could be something totally different by the time it's actually recorded than what you wrote. What's your experience along those lines?
Right. Well, and what a lot of people don't understand is that unless somebody pays you to write a screenplay, it is a spec script. And so a spec script is really a tied down version with, like I said before, you only have so many pages to convey the story. And, most of the times, if you're experienced, you can get across the screen what you want. And if you've done it in the right way, then somebody will pick it up, or, you'll win a contest or place really high in a contest or something. And it's a really difficult journey for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, who just really jumps in. And, for the most part, you can get through it. And sometimes people don't get through it. Some writers have this crazy idea that nobody should change one word of what they put down on paper. And I have known 2 people in my lifetime that have lost deals with producers who had paid them an option for a screenplay, and they wanted changes. And those idiots just, no, I'm not changing it. This is how it's supposed to be, and you cannot change one word. Well, that's called tearing up your project. And you're off of it, and they are hiring someone else to rewrite your story because you are stupid and you can't do it.
Do you think that screenwriting made your novel writing better, or how do you?
As a matter of fact, yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. I mean, you can just ramble on and on and on in a novel, and take up as many pages as you want. And after I wrote, like, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 screenplays, I noticed that my novels were changing. And sometimes they became a little bit too sparse, and I had to, go back in there and start padding them up a little bit, because they weren't a screenplay, they were a novel, which means, your readers want details. They don't want to be cut out of the story.
So then when you give advice when you're doing the edits and formatting or coaching writers, do you coach writers that are novelists and screenwriters and other things, or how do you approach those differently?
Yeah, they're 3 totally different things. I mean, I've coached a couple of screenwriters, and that turned out really well, giving them feedback on how they could improve their scenes or their dialogue. And to me, it's very important that you use a program so that you can hear the dialogue. And if it doesn't sound good to you, if it doesn't make any sense, then you know that you have to make some changes, because no actor is going to want some, scrimpy dialogue that doesn't sound good. So, if you're going to go for trying to get an option, or even to enter a screenplay into a competition, you've got to put your best foot forward. And a lot of times writers kind of balk at that. But on the fiction side, I do a really deep dive into editing, and some people really appreciate it. Some people get offended at it. But, if you are not following your characters the way they should be followed, or if you misspell your own characters' names, or forgot that you had a dog in, the first third of the book, and then, you never saw that dog again, you've got to own up for, your own weaknesses, and learn how to, go through your own document before you even give it to an editor, and, have a few other of your writer friends or just regular friends go through it, so you can, put your best foot forward. And it's basically the same with nonfiction. You have to make sure that you have done your research and everything is the way it is supposed to be, because I do look up the things that people put in their nonfiction books to make sure that, there's nothing that's been plagiarized and, that everything is on the up and up. And the same thing goes for fiction writers also. You better make sure that when you say that your character is like a dog catcher or something, you better know what that dog catcher is supposed to do, what they are never supposed to do, what the rules and regulations are, and all that. Dog catcher, cops, it doesn't make any difference. You've got to take the time to research for a novel and a screenplay.
Yeah, it's a lot more collaboration, especially when you think that you're writing a novel by yourself, and then you have somebody that is either just letting you know what they think about it, like I would call like an ideal reader, where you just do a draft and then see if it tracks with somebody else reading it, if they can understand it, or if you're dealing with a coach or an editor, then really they're a part of it too. It's not just you. And I've written a couple books with some other people, and one of the big lessons of that is you can't be so locked into what you are writing that you couldn't get rid of a whole lot of it if the other person said, that's not how I see the story. So if all the collaborators are feeling that way, then hopefully you're going to get the best out of things. But have you, besides doing the editing and publishing for other people, have you collaborated on writing anything with others? I guess if you're writing scripts and that's going to producers and things, they have their own ideas for what makes up the script.
Yeah. There's collaboration across the board in a lot of different things. I mean, I know a lot of writers that, for novels and nonfiction, they just are fully focused. They don't want anybody else in their pages or anything, and that's fine and dandy. But, when you do have an editor, your editor, if you're paying for an editor, look at the advice, look at it, feel it out. Don't just, have this huge argument and tell somebody that, they don't know what's in your head, because what's in your head, you put on paper. And one thing I can say is the really great thing about where we are today in publishing and self-publishing is that if someone points out a bunch of errors, you need to take the time to make those corrections and upload a new version. But I have had a couple of dialogues with some writers who were published by small publishers that will not make any corrections to upload a file. And I don't understand that whatsoever. Why would you want something out there that has, errors all over it?
Yeah, it's amazing how many people look at something and how many word processing programs or whatever you send it through, and then you get the book or you're reading it online, and then you see, oh, this quotation mark is missing, or there's this maybe arguably there could be a comma here, but maybe there shouldn't be, and those are just the little things. But then when you see the word errors, that's when you're like, oh man, how did everybody miss that?
Well, and I have a couple of things that just really tick me off. Like if you have the same word in the same sentence or a short paragraph, you need to change one of those words. In most programs, all you have to do is right click and it'll come up with, synonyms or something. So just choose another one and bam, it's there, that. And, I read an awful lot of books. I read between 2 and 6 books a week. And I think I'm 35 books ahead on my Goodreads reading challenge thing. I'm up to like 148 or 150 books for this year so far. And I always leave reviews. And sometimes my reviews are not happy reviews for, the author. And it's because their books are riddled with errors. They have missing words or misspelled words, or, I read a book just recently, and, I've got highlights all throughout that thing because it's like they had words transposed. It's like putting the cart before the horse. It's like, good grief, fix this stupid thing. And sometimes I will hunt down an author and try to find their email address or their website to contact them and say, you've got a really good story here, but it is really screwed up. And, whoever edited this thing, you should demand a refund. The end,
Yeah, it ruins the reading experience. Do you see that mainly in self-published things, or do you find it just as much in published house stuff?
Published house stuff, it's all across the board. What infuriates me is when I see on the cover of the book that this is an international bestseller or a New York Times bestseller or a USA Today bestseller, and their book has, there's a flip to this. Either their book has not been edited, or whoever was in charge of making the edits didn't make the edits, or the wrong file was used. I don't know what it was. I mean, it could be any of those things. It's just really galls me.
Yeah. I think oftentimes, especially in the world of self-publishing, which my books are self-published on Amazon, that you get to the point where you finished it. And I like that quote of art isn't finished. It's just, you get sick of it. You get sick of working on it. I messed the quote up. I can't remember what it is. Anyway, the idea is you've read your own story so many times that you're like, okay, this is ready. It's ready to go. And you've had it sent to the editor, and you've done all those corrections. And every time you get a new file, if you're getting it from a publishing place that's handling uploading the file, or if you're doing it yourself, I feel like I have to read it all the way through every time, because you don't know if it's going to mess up the formatting on the next page. And there's just so much stuff to look at. And then you have to think, well, if somebody else had this file, did they change anything that they didn't tell me about? And am I going to agree with that change? And now I got to go back and look at it. So maybe that's a little paranoia, but it does seem like you get so sick of it that you're like, I'm just going to publish it. But hopefully it's to a point where it's greatly refined before you do that. And I've seen a lot of writers that self-published either through Amazon or other places, where I read their books because I know them or met them at a writing group or something. And I do like the story, but it's hard to read through. It's like when you're grading a paper and there's plagiarism in it, it takes so much longer than a paper that isn't, that the voice of the person that's written it because you've read other papers by them. And then you see this thing, and now you got to go on an investigation that's going to take 2 hours instead of 20 minutes. It's I wonder if that's a lot of the reason some of that gets through. Is it, I guess you'd call that laziness, or they just reach the end of their capability of being able to proofread it over again?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so, you're working with an editor, and the editor marks up your document, and then it's up to you, the author, to go through line by line and make a correction. Or, if you also have to take into consideration, okay, so they didn't get what I was talking about, but that has a flip side. If they didn't get what you were talking about, then did you not have it worded properly? because you have to think of the reader out there, you know, in the world of, you know, Amazon or whatever, you know, somebody who downloads your book and they're a complete stranger. They don't know you or anything else, you know, and if they don't understand something, then you have totally screwed up, you know. So, but anyways, you know, so you've got an editor, they've given you all these changes, and you do your best to make the changes, and then, you know, you give the file back to whoever is going to, you know, publish your book, and then they do their thing. Okay, so when you get a file before it is uploaded, I highly suggest taking the time and hiring a proofreader. That way there, you have completely fresh eyes on it. Your editor is sick of it. You're sick of it. Everybody else is sick of it. But when you have a proofreader, and not just your cousin Joan, you know, I'm talking about somebody who specifically proofreads books, then you're likely to catch things that, you know, you never saw. I mean, you just can't, you know, after, you know, reading it 14 times, you know, you can't even tell if there's ink on the paper anymore. So hire a proofreader, let them go through it, and then you make those final changes and just wish it well.
It's good advice. Good advice.
Well, I mean, it costs money, but I mean, you are investing in yourself.
True. Plus, 100 years from now, when somebody finds it, hopefully it still makes sense.
Yeah.
Or will this era we're living in now be known as like the second dark ages, where people publish things that aren't proofread? Anyway.
Yeah, I already see that every day. It's awful.
How'd you get into publishing?
You know, it's one of those things where I had an idea of something and nobody was interested in it. And I knew that it had value. So, and this was my very first nonfiction book. It's my hardcover, The Puppy Baby book, which is a fill-in-the-blanks baby book for anyone who adopts a puppy or a young dog. It's just like an infant baby book. And nobody would do anything with it. And let's see, that was, I published it December 1st, 2000. And it's just odd when you think about all the rejections that I got from not just publishers, but literary agents and, you know, anybody else. But here it is, 2023, and that book is still selling. So that kind of tells you something. You know, sometimes you have to go with your gut feeling and take matters into your own hands. And that's what started my publishing company. You know, that was the very first thing that I published, you know, and then after that, it was Mastering Your Money. I published that back in 2009. And then my very first novel was published in 2011. So, and everything else is history from there. So it was like fiction, nonfiction, you know, back and forth. You know, today I have, I think 17 novels and 7 nonfiction books, 50 some odd themed notebooks. And
yeah, what's the deal with those? How's that theme notebook market?
You know, it's really interesting. I have one that has turned into a steady seller, which, you know, I'm pretty surprised about. And it's, what is the exact title on that thing? what to do when someone dies or something like that. It's I have a 10-page list of all the things that you need to think about when somebody passes away. I mean, there's, and I tell people to do all the legal things first. Anything that you think, is a legal part of that. And then the other things that really need to get done. Trying to think, let's see. Where is it? It's just one of those surprise things that just kind of came out of the woodwork. Yeah, what to do when a loved one dies. It's in paperback, and it's 200 pages, and it gives you plenty of space to, log things in. I tell people to write the date, the task number from the list, and then write the details of, what you did, who you spoke with, and the date that you did it. I mean, it's like a backup system, and there's just so many things that you can be responsible for, especially if you are, put in charge of the estate. It's like, holy smokes, what the heck do I do? So, I mean, it's not a bestseller or anything like that, but I mean, it's been selling on a steady basis, and I'm hoping that eventually it will be, it could become a bestseller in the notebook categories.
Are most notebooks or theme notebooks, are they a cover and then blank pages or lined pages, or do they have a mixture of like a workbook?
It's all of that, as a matter of fact. It depends on what you're creating. I mean, all of mine, instead of putting the synopsis of what it's about on the back cover, I have it inside the notebook. That way there, it's the first thing they see when they open up that paperback. And that way there, they know right off the bat what they should do, what it's for, and all that. I mean, it's really kind of interesting, all the different subjects that you could possibly think of. Mine are, well, I've got astrology books, all 12 signs. Those are pretty popular. I had a guy write to me a really nasty note about one of my books. It's Breaking Bad Habits.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's, hang on just a second. I say that this book goes beyond trying to quit smoking or drinking. Do you twirl your hair? I mean, all these different little habits, and how you can use the book to break the pattern, and write out everything until your brain is dry. And so this guy writes me a message, and he was really pissed off that it wasn't a book about how he could break his bad habit. And that, he was adamant that there was not anything that explained that it was a notebook for him to write things in. And so I went to Amazon and I cut and pasted the description, and I sent it to him, and I'm there. It says it right here that it's a blank book, and I am
That
not
must be that.
I'm not responsible for your
that,
bad reading habits.
That's the one bad review on Amazon. I was looking at your notebooks available on Amazon, and I saw one that was a 1-star, and I was like, what? How do you get a 1-star review on a notebook? And it doesn't have the words for it. It just shows the 1-star. He didn't write anything in there.
That was the guy that messaged me.
Mm.
and I'm surprised that he didn't go back and change that. I'm embarrassed for him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it
it's just
doesn't have. I couldn't find any explanation of it. It's just the 1 star. But I think that sets it apart because then you're like, oh well. I mean, I might be interested in seeing what a 1 star notebook is. Let's have a look. It's a blank book. So
yeah,
how can they go wrong?
yeah. It's really kind of crazy. But what are you going to do?
So when you make your books, do you do the cover designs for them, or how do you handle those
On the notebooks.
notebooks and then your other books too?
Oh, okay, so on the notebooks, I do all the cover designs. On the novels and the nonfiction, sometimes I have a really good picture in my brain, and I get somebody to produce that. I cannot draw stick figures, so don't leave it to me. But I have 2 sons that are artists, so it's like, here you go, start thinking about this.
Nice. I noticed on Amazon they have a thing now when you publish a book, you have to put if you used AI at all in it, whether
Mhm.
you're generating the cover with it or generating any information inside. And I
Yeah.
haven't used any of those programs to do a cover, but that would be interesting to whether I've seen some examples of people that have taken, and the examples I've seen were verses from the Bible, and they don't give any context. They don't say what book it's from. They just put it into the AI and say, like the Sermon on the Mount, and it comes back with pictures
Mm.
that are, it seems like pictures from one of those the older Bibles with the oil painting pictures.
Oh yeah.
And it seems along that line, but it's not a picture I've seen before. And they would just put a verse in about the seas being rough and the
Mm.
people were on the boat and they were afraid. And you see a boat and then you see the picture and you're like, oh, okay, that's kind of it. You could kind of say that's a picture of the disciples on a lake in a boat in a storm with Jesus. But it's I wonder, I guess it just has to do with the inputs as to what you can get. And I wonder how many covers and artwork are going to be AI generated in the future. I don't know if,
Yeah,
I
I'm
guess
not
if you use
really
it,
sure. I am completely reluctant to use anything like that because uh, we're probably going to be, I don't know, for the next 2 or 3 years until it is completely everybody is 100% immersed in AI in all aspects of reading and writing and everything that they do in their life. So right now it's like I don't even want Amazon to think for 1 second that anything to do with any of my books have any form of AI. Yeah, and I remember when I first saw that little box on whichever of the 3 pages it is when you upload to KDP, about the AI. And I've warned, some of my writer friends, if you're thinking it, don't do it. Because right now, the way Amazon is, you could get banned if you do something wrong,
hmm.
Uh, it's just too new, to even go down that road. And
What do you,
something else to think about too is okay, so you use whatever AI program is out there. There's several that you could sign up for. Some of them are free, some of them cost you something, but and you could put something in a prompt and it comes back with an answer. But what bothers me is like, where is it pulling that from? It's not generating it from their own little AI brain. It's generating it from the millions and millions and millions of pieces of material that's out there on the internet.
mhm.
So theoretically, you don't know if you are going to be plagiarizing something or someone. You just don't know. And that's why I'm just so against it. I think AI is great for brainstorming, just to get ideas about something. But I would not take anything in depth and just copy and paste it into my book or script or whatever it was.
Yeah. I wouldn't do it with words. I was thinking more of pictures, but I guess you still have the same worries with pictures as with words. Like doing a storyboard, you put your book in and then just get an AI program to do a storyboard of some scene highlights, so
Yeah,
you
where's it
can
coming
see if
from?
you.
You know?
Yeah, that's it. Here's a good question then. How is that different from how a human comes up with ideas, or I guess more importantly, where do ideas come from?
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, you know, that's really interesting because I know a lot of my ideas, both fiction and nonfiction, screenplays and books, have, as far as I'm concerned, been like a download, while I'm napping or, driving or doing something like that, So where does that come from? Am I picking up from, you know, other people, other eras? How do we know? We don't know. Is there anybody out there that can, uh, take a stethoscope to my head and see if they can hear something going on in there, with words? I mean, uh, who knows where it comes from?
I've done written some science fiction books, and they have AIs in them, so I've thought a lot about where ideas come from, where creativity is, what would separate, or how could you tell the difference between an AI or a computer intelligence from a person intelligence. And we'll set aside the idea that we're all living in a simulation and we're all programs anyway. Let's put that idea aside and go that we're organic. And how do you separate, or where does an organic idea come from versus an idea that's in a inorganic or a computer come from? And it does seem like computers and people, or AIs and computers, AIs and people learn the same,
Mhm.
because it's just learning from what you see and what you experience and what you hear. And really, that's what the AI is doing, except so much faster than a person.
Mhm.
And I wonder if that means that ideas or creativity specifically comes from outside of a person.
Mhm.
Like the Romans say, and I explain this a lot in different conversations, but the idea of the Romans, genius was not a thing where you look at a picture or a writing or a carving and you say, you're a genius for making this. They meant it as, from what I understand, they meant it as the genius is from outside of you, that you're kind of like a
Conduit.
conduit for that genius.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I'm not worried either way what the answer is. It's just interesting. To
Mhm.
me, it feels like sometimes I can come up with an idea and I know where it came from. And then other times the idea is just there, whether it's you're not writing or you are writing, and then something just clicks and everything lines up. Or you work on something and then you step back from it and you see a larger picture that you didn't see before, and it just worked out that way. Is that just chance? Was it design? Is it something in your unconscious mind that made it? Is it something outside of you that made it? Or is it something working with your mind that made it? And I think if computers ever become like like all the science fiction movies or dystopian things where the computer takes over the world, whether it's Superman 3 type computer or like the Terminator, is they're probably going to look back and they're going to use all these conversations where people talk about AIs and they go, look, this person didn't think we were real, or this person had a problem with this. I guess that little off the conversation of where creativity comes from, but all those things I thought about when I was writing about AI and trying to put myself in the position of people dealing with AI or the AI itself. And it just seems like a much smarter, maybe not smarter, but a much more expansive intellect than a person has. Then that gets you into the existential of a person. Are we limited in intellect for some reason to experience this life through this certain view versus everything else all at once? But what are your thoughts? Your thoughts on that?
So, okay, when you think about who we are, how we got to where we are, go back to the first caveman that holds a club and bonks his fellow caveman. There's the first murder. But when you think about how we have grown as human beings, and some people have a really great thought process system where they are very open to creative ideas that come to them from wherever, because like I said, I've had a lot of things come to me that I have, as far as I'm concerned, I've downloaded them from the universe. So computers and AI and everything else that you could possibly think of that was discovered, created, invented, those came from a human being whose mind was open to, their crazy thought processes. And they developed them, and so first came the computer, and then came the thoughts of, what can I do with this? Where can it go? How can it help? How can it leap? And then AI. So AI is a mechanical creature from a human being's brain. It didn't just all of a sudden pop out of somewhere. It was created, by a computerized person. A person who, delved into computers and, was really deep into, what they could do, what they could possibly do. I know people, very, laid back, simple people who have no imagination whatsoever. They don't think outside of their little box. They don't have any thoughts of how something could work, or, I don't know. I have always been a creative person ever since I was a child. And I don't understand people that don't have a good thought process, no creativity, no thinking about anything other than get up, eat breakfast, go to work, come home, cook supper, maybe watch TV, go to bed. I would kill myself before living a life like that. My God, how completely limited that would be. So I think I've deviated off of somewhere, but
you had a lot of good ideas there. The idea that life kind of crushes creativity or imagination, where when you're a kid, you have all these this imagination maybe about your dream house and how there's a rocket ship and an underwater place to get to it, and probably a sliding board from a couple stories up. And then as you get older, you kind of lose those things. It's kind of reminds me of the movie Drop Dead Fred, where the lady has a imaginary friend, Fred, drop dead Fred, and as she gets older, she forgets about him. I think there was a cartoon movie of similar explanation to that, where they have that imaginary friend, and then it just goes to a place where it's forgotten forever. And you're visualizing how the human brain works. And I wonder, it would have to be that the brain is like a muscle, where if you exercise it, then it gets better at whatever task you're doing. So if you do a lot of squats, you can probably lift a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
And if you think creatively about things, then that's going to influence your brain, especially when you're a kid and you're growing. So everybody, well, a lot of people probably have the same experience growing up, where you meet some other kids and you go play and they don't know how to play, whether it's blocks or Legos or GI Joe people, or playing in the dirt or playing in the woods or whatever. They just don't know because they hadn't done it. And I wonder if they've missed out on that, and now for the rest of their lives they can't do that anymore. Like when I sit down and try to play Legos now, I still like the idea of Legos. I don't own any anymore, because when I was working a regular job, there wasn't enough time to come home and play Legos, and I didn't have kids to play them with. So maybe that's a reason to have kids. And I found that when you're a kid, you can play Legos for hours. You can play all day. But then as an adult trying to play, even if you're just saying, I'm going to make a architectural model of something, something that maybe is a little more refined than knights and space people. And I couldn't do it for more than 15 minutes. My attention span, my kid attention span was gone. And I wonder how bad society is, or what negative effect it is, when we kind of destroy that thinking in kids, where it either happens with life or because you're wanting them to sit still and listen. But it'd be interesting to be able to somehow unlock that kid mind again as an adult. And maybe that when adults look at other people that are the creative minded, that's what's going on. They have more of that kid mind, or they nurtured that imagination more, and they kept it alive. Now, then the other question is it something within themselves? Are they bringing in things from life experience, and they manifest this creativity, whether it's painting or writing or photography, dance, anything like that? Are they manifesting that themselves, or is it an outside entity that's like, oh, I realize that this person is still, I'm able to communicate this creativity to them. For instance, if we had a computer and we taught the computer, it's a thing created by intelligence. So we're going to call ourselves intelligent, and we created computers, which are now intelligent, maybe more intelligent than us in data collection and creating a database. Just the capacity of it is so much bigger, maybe. So
Analyzing,
is that an
computers are
argument?
better at analyzing than we are.
Is that an argument for the idea of humans being created versus just evolution? And could you say that evolution was the tool that a designer made, or a designer used to create people? Just like we're creating better and better computers. Did the designer work on the caveman first and go, okay, not quite right, let's change this thing, let's change this thing? And whether it was through eating a fungus and making their brain grow, if you go through the stoned ape theory, or if it's just something that it's just changed because a creator we don't understand was able to do it. Like maybe a computer doesn't understand that we're able to put more programs into a computer. Wow, that's a pretty big argument for intelligent design.
I want to go back to the creativity. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people just seem like they are, I don't know, that they are just, they just don't have anything up there, you know?
Mm.
But I really believe that if you read a book, at least, read something once a month, let your brain get into it, let your creativity unwind. I think you can build up being a creative person, or at least someone with who can grow a vast imagination just from reading on a steady basis. I grew up reading. It's really kind of funny because as a small child, it seemed like this is all I ever saw when I was talking, tried to talk to somebody. It's like, they were behind a cover of either a book, a magazine, a journal, or a newspaper. And I'm really grateful for the learning experience. Read this book, read that book, look at all these books. I mean, my maternal grandfather was like a Zane Grey person, and then H.G. Wells and Burroughs. My mother, my God, she owned every single Barbara Cartland book that was ever printed, And then my father was the Wall Street Journal and the Barron's and, the newspapers.
Mhm.
So I grew up and became very well-rounded with reading, and just really love the fact that I can get lost in a book, a well-written book, I should say, with no screw-ups.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think that if there's someone out there that who has very little imagination, whose world is really kind of like in a box, where they'd get up, go to work, and all that, if they would just turn off the television and all their devices and pick up a book, or read an ebook, just read every single day, and it doesn't have to be a whole chapter. I mean, read a paragraph. Just get your brain started on accepting that I just may enjoy this. Wow, I may just get something out of this. I can grow my brain,
Mhm.
and eventually come out of their little box and explore the greater world around them.
It's yeah, exercising the brain is going to help. It's putting on your science fiction hat for a second here.
Mhm.
I think it comes back to the AI is it learns just like a person. So as far as creativity goes, I think an AI, a computer or whatever, can learn and be creative just as much as a person can. Because think of how many books that AI is reading.
Oh, I
And
know.
even if you go with the idea where it's not really reading, it's just a group of signals put together and it translates to zeros and ones, and then it's a database and collecting things. It's doing the same thing people do. You have to understand what you're reading, and you understand it by learning alphabet, learning a language, and then I just think the AI is more intelligent and more creative than people give it credit for. And if it's not, then that's just a reflection of people, that
Mhm.
we're not as creative and as intelligent as we think. If we don't think a computer or some artificial intelligence can be just as creative as we are. It's that openness to creativity you were talking about, that if
Mhm.
you're I write a lot of poetry about that issue because I'm always worried, am I not going to be able to write poetry anymore? Like, is it just going to go away? Like, I feel compelled to write it now, and to the point where you're just throughout your normal day, similar to you in the 70s with the yellow notepad, where
Yeah.
you just write a note down. That's the big difference between a writer and a not writer, is you wrote it down. So
Mhm.
whether it's putting in your notes section on your phone or writing it down on a piece of paper, you're saving that idea for later. And it's kind of like you're collecting these puzzle pieces and you're putting them together. So if you're using that as a dialogue in a story or a line in a poem, and then you put those things together later, you wouldn't have seen that if you hadn't have been open to it at the time.
Right.
So when I'm thinking about poetry, it seems like when you take that moment to start thinking, or you show up at the computer to write it, or whatever it is, however you start your creative process, that I've found it's always there. That whatever it is, that creativity is outside of you, somewhere within you, a mix of both, that no matter what, if you show up, it's right there, and it's
Mhm.
always trying to talk to you.
Right.
I don't know if that makes me sound crazy, but
Then there's
it
a lot of
certainly
us crazies.
feels like it. Yeah, it certainly feels like it's there.
Well, I mean,
How'd you,
I've written a couple of books. One, The Last Dog, which is my dystopian. I was trying to take a nap, and this story just kept building to the point where I'm there. Okay, damn it. I will get up right this minute. And I went into my office and I banged out 10 pages of an outline. You
yeah.
know, I think that there are probably instances in anyone's life that they have opportunities come through and they think, well, that's crazy, and they never act on any of it, whereas you and I have an open mind, and we realize that this is coming from somewhere, and geez, this is pretty good. We ought to do something with this.
It's from
Yeah.
beside those times when you have those ideas bubble up enough to where they're just immediate action must be taken. How do you get into the state of mind to write? What's your process for that?
I don't know if I have a state of mind. I think it's just me, as my being. I don't ever have writer's block. I cannot associate with that thought. It's like writer's block. My God, I've got file folders filled of little scraps of paper with all these ideas that,
Mm.
if I could somehow miraculously grow another head and another pair of arms, I could probably bang out a novel or, something, every single week, I mean,
You could do a notebook on ideas for books and film. I have a file in my phone that is just like, it'll be, usually it's a title and then a little explanation of what the idea is. And I know Stephen King's view on that is a notebook is a way to immortalize bad ideas. But I think for a lot of people, that's the difference, again, between writers and not. You wrote it down and you can come back later and visit it. So
right.
it's,
There's good nuggets that can expand into much, larger things. I mean, and like you said, if you write it down, then it seems to me that kind of cements it into the physical realm, instead of just your thought process. I mean, writing it down, just or typing it, whichever, I mean, it gives it life.
Yeah, it's that little thread that you can come back to later and see what's going on with that. And then other times those ideas, as you said before, they have to get out. You have to get up and write it down. And you could write a whole short story, a whole outline, a huge amount of pages on something from just that thing that is bubbling up inside of you that has to get out.
Yeah.
I like it when that happens, but I'm also a little aggravated when you're trying to sleep and it happens. But I've missed out on those ideas enough to very infrequently now will I try to think to myself, okay, let's just worry about that later. I'm not gonna write that down. I'm not gonna wake myself up enough to write that down. And then those ideas are gone and you're like, man, I wonder I can't remember what that was, but I bet it was going to be great. And I had so many good ideas from that I don't think it immortalizes bad ideas. I think it just saves those things from wherever in the cosmos or in the universe they're coming by at that point, that maybe they'll come by again, but maybe you should recognize that and say, okay, there's an idea. So in my notes on my phone, I have short story ideas, and then I have comedy things. Like if I was going to ever be a stand-up comedian, I think the difference there is you write those things down that make you laugh. So if you just take those things and maybe you get one or two a week, one or two a month, eventually you're going to have 5 minutes worth of material if you ever need to do a stand-up show. So that, and then short story ideas, poetry things, and oftentimes it just comes in lines of a character. Like I'll hear something, somebody will say something, and it's not exactly that line, but it makes you think about something else. And you're like, oh, I'm going to write that down. And then maybe later you find a character or a character that would say that. And that starts a whole scene, which starts a whole story, which makes a book, which could be more than that. And I think that's how the creativity grows.
Well, on my nightstand, I have a pad of paper and a mechanical pencil and a flashlight if I don't want to put the light on. And
the pencil, because when you're laying down, you don't want the ink to run.
No, I get up.
You want it to write?
I physically get up and stand in front of my nightstand. And if I don't want to put the flashlight on or the light, then I've got my pencil and I've got my pad, and hopefully I can read it the next morning, but I always, if something wakes me up, I get my butt out of bed and I write it down, because fleeting seconds, it's gone. You will never get it back again. You may get, one tiny little thought, but you can't get that whole thing back again ever. So I have pads of paper and pens and pencils in every room of this house and in my purse. I mean, I'm just one of those people that jots things down, and that's why I have all these folders full of little, notes and, outlines and things.
I remember when I got one is the pen that is pressurized, so you can write upside down, the astronaut pen.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So then you could write it wherever you were. If you just woke up and you had to write something down really quick. And then I got a pen that when you click it, it lights up on the bottom, which I used at work when I was policing, because if you're writing a summons or something at night, you don't have to turn all the lights on inside your car and mess up your night vision. You're just writing right here on the page. But it worked great at night when you woke up and you had to write down something you thought of. I've also had times where when you're asleep, or I get a lot of good ideas swimming, working out, or in the shower. So I think there's a connection with the physical exertion of working out, but also with water. To me, seems like something.
Oh yeah.
I think there's the scientific explanation of negative ions in the air make you feel better. And that's why you should have running water around your house somewhere, a fountain, or if you live by the ocean or a waterway, why you feel better. But nonetheless, I've had it to where it's just words. So I write down words. I've also had music, like you wake up from a dream and there was some
Melodies.
music in it. Yep.
Mm.
And you have to figure out how to record that. So whether that's recording the tune into your, a tape player or your phone, or if it's writing down in words what the tune was. I get a lot of those. And then also every now and then pictures. Like if you wake up from a dream and you draw a quick picture, it's probably not, it's nothing that you're going to go, hey, check this out to anybody, because I don't know how to draw that well because I didn't exercise that part of my head yet. But you can draw a basic picture down and it'll make you remember all those feelings that maybe you wouldn't get from the words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to try to figure out where all that stuff comes from, whether you're wide awake and you have the idea or you're asleep and you have the idea.
Again, I think it has to do with, how you have, just what is the word that I want? I don't know, how you've had your brain develop.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a person who is open to, thoughts and feelings and, creative things, I feel like you are more apt to have things, come to you from, I don't know, is it your higher self? Is it your imagination? Is it, the universe? You have your own little fairy up there that taps you on the head or something. It's like, who knows where it comes from. But I think that there are people who have open minds. There are people who have closed minds or undeveloped minds. They just don't have any imagination or creativity. And again, if you want to build that up, start reading or doing something to, develop your creativity. Because otherwise, it's just, I don't know, it's just, it's like fog.
Yeah.
You've got fog up there, nothing else.
Develop those receptors. So then wherever that is collected from, it recognizes you. That's my feeling of it, is because you've been there or put yourself in that state of mind so many times, whatever else it is within you or outside of you, that it recognizes what you're doing. And it's like, oh, okay, here's an idea. Here's a thought.
Yeah.
It can communicate with you that way. It's kind of like Tetris. I visualize it sometimes where you find that right block that fits in, and then maybe those 5 lines of things disappear. But what are those 5 lines? Is that a good idea? And is that going away to somewhere else? And maybe that's how it works. I don't know.
Yeah. That reminds me of the movie Tetris. I thought that was fabulous.
Oh, there's a movie Tetris?
Mm-hmm.
I got to check that out.
Yeah.
How'd I miss that? All right. We talked a lot about creativity. I like that. I like it.
It's important.
Yeah. I think it's so much of what makes humans human, or what makes anything, whether you look at another animal and they figured out how to use a tool to do something, or figured out a way to, like dolphins or sea lions catching fish or working together. It's pretty great.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah.
I appreciate your time, and I don't want to take up too much of it, but do you have any thoughts or ideas in closing, or anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
I don't think so. I had a good time. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, you don't often get to talk to people about creativity because they think you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And then when you try to talk to the people, like if you tried to talk to a wayward soul that lives on the street, that is probably connected to something else somewhere else through some different, it seems like they're existing on different levels at once. Maybe that's schizophrenia, maybe it's something else. But I've talked to a few before, just in passing, work in public service, where sometimes it's just you can't understand anything, and other times you can tell that person is having 3 or 4 different conversations at the same time, and it's with other people that aren't there, but it's with also you. And if you think about it enough, you can keep up with it. At least I found you can keep up with it. I can't contribute anything to the conversation because all my bandwidth is spent trying to figure out what they're talking about. But
sometimes you just have to step back
yeah,
very slowly and carefully, you know.
it's good to be able to talk to like-minded people.
Yeah,
so I definitely
it really is.
appreciate your time, and your website and other social media things will be in the show notes. This will be on Spotify and YouTube to start, maybe some other places in the future. But
Right.
thank you very much for your time, and perhaps in the future we can speak again.
Well, thank you. Yes, you have my number. You know how to get in touch with me. You want to chat, just call me up.
All right. All right. I'll talk to you on the other side of this. Okay.
Okay, take care.